It is the iconic image of imperial might in the late Bronze Age, immortalized on the temple walls at Abu Simbel. The pharaoh of Egypt in his light, two-wheeled chariot, a golden whirlwind of speed and power, raining arrows down upon his enemies. This was the superweapon of its day, the ancient equivalent of the main battle tank, a technology that forged and broke empires. But this ultimate war machine had a fatal secret, a critical dependency hidden in plain sight. Its engine, the strong, fast, and intelligent horse, was not a product of the Nile Valley. It was an import, a vital biological technology that had to be acquired at immense cost from the far-off barbarian lands of the north. How did the mightiest empires on earth become so utterly dependent on a foreign horse supply? And what power did this give to the forgotten horse lords who controlled it? To understand the world of the late Bronze Age, from roughly 1600 to 1200 BC, is to understand an age of superpowers. This was the first great era of international diplomacy and conflict, a high-stakes geopolitical chess game played between the great, established empires. The new kingdom of Egypt, the powerful Hittite Empire in Anatolia, and the enigmatic kingdom of Mitanni in Syria. At the very center of this struggle, the decisive piece on the board was a revolutionary military technology. The light spoked-wheel war chariot. This was not a clumsy cart. It was a sophisticated weapons platform, a mobile archery post that could outmaneuver infantry and dominate the flat, open battlefields of the Near East. This investigation will frame the entire international balance of power during this epic era as a function of one critical economic and logistical question: who could acquire the most and the best horses? The great urbanized empires had the wealth and the workshops to perfect the chariot, but they lacked the vast, open grasslands needed to breed the powerful, high-strung horses required to pull it effectively. This created a profound strategic vulnerability and gave birth to one of the most important and least understood networks of ancient trade in history, the Great Horse Pipeline. Our journey will follow the path of this vital biological commodity. We will trace its origins to the Great Eurasian Steppes, the cradle of the horse, and identify the horse lords, the semi-nomadic peoples who were the world's first and greatest horse breeders. We will map the perilous, 1,000-mile-long trade routes that brought these animals south, across mountains and through hostile territory. We will uncover the immense wealth of the forgotten horse-trading empires, the powerful middlemen who grew rich and powerful by controlling this strategic supply chain. We will delve into the remarkable diplomatic records of the age, the Amarna letters, to show kings and pharaohs begging, flattering, and threatening one another for shipments of prize horses. And finally, we will argue that the very fragility of this horse pipeline was a key factor in the catastrophic collapse that brought the entire Bronze Age crashing down. This is not a story about a simple commodity. It is the story of the world's first great strategic arms trade, an economy built on the speed and power of the horse, and a timeless lesson in how even the mightiest empires can be brought to their knees by their dependency on a single foreign resource. Before the chariot, before the cavalry, before the very concept of a world connected by the speed of travel, there was the horse. But this was not the animal we know today. For millions of years, it was a wild and wary creature, a denizen of the vast, open grasslands that stretched in an unbroken band from Eastern Europe to Mongolia. This was the Eurasian steppe, the great cradle of the horse. It was here, in this immense, windswept sea of grass, that the horse was transformed through a long and complex process of domestication, from a source of food into a revolutionary new engine of transport, warfare, and power. To understand the economy of the horse trade, we must first appreciate the unique biological miracle of the horse itself. The process of domestication was not a single event, but a slow, multi-generational dance between man and animal. Early hunter-gatherers on the steppe had hunted wild horses for their meat for millennia. But around 3500 BC, at sites like Botai in modern-day Kazakhstan, we see the first clear evidence of a profound shift in this relationship. Archaeologists here have found not just horse bones, but evidence of corrals, of horse manure in the soil, and most tellingly, wear patterns on the teeth of the horse skulls that are consistent with the use of a bit, a clear sign of riding. These early horse cultures were not just hunting horses, they were harnessing them. They were the first to unlock the animal's true potential. What was this potential? The horse possessed a unique and potent combination of biological attributes that made it unlike any other domesticated animal. First and foremost was its speed. The horse's entire anatomy is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, designed for swift, efficient locomotion. Its long legs, its powerful hindquarters, and its unique ability to lock its leg joints with minimal muscular effort, allowing it to stand for long periods, made it an animal of unparalleled stamina. But the true secret to its speed was its respiratory system. A horse can synchronize its breathing with its gallop, taking one breath for every stride, a process that allows for an incredibly efficient intake of oxygen, making it the supreme long-distance runner of the animal kingdom. This speed was coupled with a surprising degree of intelligence and, crucially, trainability. While other herd animals like cattle are governed by a simple pecking order, horse herds have a more complex social structure, with a lead stallion and a lead mare. They are animals that are hardwired to respond to leadership and to work cooperatively within a group. This social intelligence made them uniquely receptive to training. A horse could be taught to respond to the subtle commands of a rider, to overcome its natural flight instinct, and to charge into the noise and chaos of a human battle. This combination of speed, stamina, and a trainable mind was a package of attributes found in no other animal. Donkeys and onagers, the pack animals of the Near East, were hardy and strong, but they lacked the horse's speed and spirit. They could carry a burden, but they could not become a partner in conquest. The early horse cultures of the steppe were the first to harness this power. On horseback, they could hunt more effectively, manage their vast herds of livestock with greater efficiency, and most importantly, they could move across the immense distances of the steppe with a speed that was previously unimaginable. This was a revolution in human mobility. It effectively shrank their world, allowing for greater contact, greater trade, and greater conflict between disparate groups. The horse created a new kind of human, the nomad, the master of the grassland sea. But the horses of these early steppe cultures were not yet the magnificent war horses that would pull the chariots of the pharaohs. They were likely smaller, shaggier, and more rugged animals, similar to the modern Przeworski horse. The great, powerful breeds of the Near East were the product of a second, crucial stage of development. As the domesticated horse and the knowledge of its use began to filter southwards from the steppes and into the orbit of the great, urbanized civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Near East, a new process of selective breeding began. These southern kingdoms, with their immense wealth and their sophisticated understanding of animal husbandry, began to breed the imported steppe horses for specific traits, for greater size, for longer legs, for more powerful chests, and for a fiery but controllable temperament. This was the birth of the warhorse. It was a process that required immense resources, the best pastures, vast quantities of grain for feed, and a class of specialized trainers and handlers. The great civilizations did not domesticate the horse, but they perfected it, transforming it from a hardy steppe pony into the high-performance, biological engine that would be needed for the next great military innovation. The horse was now ready for the chariot. The stage was set for a new kind of warfare, a new kind of economy, and a new, absolute dependency on the northern lands that remained the ultimate source of this living technology. The domesticated horse was a revolution in mobility, but the true superweapon of the late Bronze Age was born when this new biological engine was hitched to a masterpiece of mechanical engineering. The light spoked-wheel war chariot. This was not the heavy, clumsy, four-wheeled battle wagon of the early Sumerians, a vehicle that was little more than a slow-moving platform for spearmen. The war chariot that emerged around 1700 BC was a completely different beast. It was a stripped-down, high-performance, two-wheeled vehicle of almost breathtaking lightness and speed, a sophisticated composite technology that represented the absolute pinnacle of Bronze Age military science. It was the ancient world's main battle tank, its fighter jet, and its aircraft carrier all rolled into one, a system that would dominate the battlefields of the Near East for 500 years. The technological heart of this revolution was the spoked wheel. Earlier wheels had been solid wooden discs, either carved from a single piece of timber or made from several planks joined together. They were incredibly heavy, incredibly slow, and prone to splitting. The invention of the spoked wheel, likely by the same steppe peoples who had perfected the use of the horse, was a stroke of engineering genius. By using a central hub, a series of light, strong, wooden spokes, and a bentwood rim, a wheel could be made that was immensely strong, but also incredibly light. This dramatically reduced the vehicle's overall weight, allowing it to be pulled by a much faster and more agile animal. The chariot itself was a marvel of composite construction, a technology that required the skills of a master woodworker, a leatherworker, and a bronzesmith. The platform was a small, D-shaped, lightweight wooden frame. The floor was not solid, but was often a woven lattice of leather straps, which acted as a primitive but effective form of suspension, absorbing the shocks of the uneven battlefield. The axle was moved to the very rear of the platform, another key innovation that increased stability at high speeds and allowed for sharp, pivoting turns. Everything about the design was optimized for speed and maneuverability. The entire vehicle, stripped down to its essentials, was so light that a single man could easily lift it. This minimalist design created the perfect platform for its primary function, mobile archery. The typical chariot crew consisted of 2 men, a driver who was a master of horsemanship, controlling the 2-horse team with reins wrapped around his body, and the warrior who was a master archer. The warrior's weapon of choice was another piece of high technology, the composite bow. Made from laminated layers of wood, horn, and animal sinew, the composite bow could store and release far more energy than a simple wooden self-bow, giving it a greater range, a flatter trajectory, and a devastating penetrating power. The war chariot was, in essence, a mobile missile platform. Its strategy was not to charge headlong into enemy infantry formations, but to use its superior speed to harass, to outflank, and to destroy the enemy from a distance. A division of war chariots would storm across the battlefield at a full gallop, a terrifying spectacle of thundering hooves and dust. They would race along the front of the enemy infantry lines, showering them with a continuous and deadly volley of arrows. Their speed made them an almost impossible target for the foot soldiers to hit. They could be used to pursue and cut down fleeing enemies, to protect the flanks of their own army, and to act as a rapid response force that could be deployed to any crisis point on the battlefield. This form of mobile, long-range warfare was a shock-and-awe tactic that the slow-moving infantry armies of the early Bronze Age simply had no answer for. And the only engine that could power this new superweapon was the horse. Donkeys and onagers, the traditional beasts of burden of the Near East, were hardy, but they simply lacked the explosive speed and, more importantly, the stamina for a prolonged battle. A chariot was a high-performance machine that required a high-performance engine. The horse, with its unique respiratory system and its social, trainable nature, was the only animal that could provide the necessary combination of speed, endurance, and responsiveness. But it couldn't just be any horse. It had to be a team of 2, perfectly matched in size and temperament, and subjected to years of specialized, intensive training to accustom them to the chaos of battle and to teach them to work in perfect unison with the driver. This created a new and incredibly expensive form of elite warfare. A single, complete chariot unit, the lightweight chassis, the composite bow, the bronze-tipped arrows, and above all, the pair of highly trained, selectively bred warhorses, was a staggering investment. It was an expenditure that only the great, centralized palace economies of the superpowers could afford on a mass scale. The king of the Hittites or the pharaoh of Egypt could field an army of 1,000, even 2,000 of these war machines. This was a level of military power that no smaller kingdom could hope to match. The chariot, therefore, became the ultimate symbol of royal power and prestige. It was the weapon of the king and the aristocracy. The elite warrior class of the late Bronze Age, like the Hittite Merianu, was a class of charioteers. Their entire identity, their social status, and their military function were defined by their mastery of this complex technological system. The chariot was the instrument that defined the age, and the horse was the indispensable technology that powered the instrument. The entire geopolitical balance of the world now rested on the ability of these great, urbanized empires to secure a steady and reliable supply of the one thing they could not produce themselves: the living engine of war. If the war chariot was the superweapon of the late Bronze Age, who were its inventors? For decades, historians assumed this revolutionary technology was developed in the sophisticated urban centers of the Near East. But a series of stunning archaeological discoveries in the vast, remote grasslands north of the Black and Caspian Seas have completely overturned this picture. The evidence is now clear. The true pioneers of the Chariot Age were not the kings of Mesopotamia or the pharaohs of Egypt, but the semi-nomadic, barbarian peoples of the Eurasian steppe. It was here, in the world of the Sintashta and Andronovo archaeological cultures, that the horse was perfected, the spoked wheel was invented, and the first true war chariots were ridden into the grave. These were the original horse lords, the innovators and master breeders who were the ultimate source of the entire Bronze Age military revolution. Flourishing around 2100 to 1800 BC, on the steppes of what is now modern-day Russia and Kazakhstan, the Sintashta culture was a society unlike any that had come before it. They were a people in transition, combining a pastoral horse-herding lifestyle with the construction of large, fortified settlements and a sophisticated, almost industrial level of metallurgy. They were a society geared for war, and their grave have provided the most dramatic and conclusive evidence for their role as the inventors of the chariot. At sites like Sintashta itself, archaeologists have unearthed a series of elaborate burial mounds, or kurgans. And within these kurgans, they found something unprecedented: the remains of the world's oldest known chariots. These were not just fragments of wheels or axles. These were the complete burials of elite warriors laid to rest with their entire, fully equipped war machines. The grave contained the post holes that mark the position of the two wheels, set at a specific, standardized gauge. They contain the faint, organic stains of the wooden chassis. And most importantly, they contain the sacrificed bodies of the horses that pulled them, often a perfectly matched pair, buried with their masters, their legs sometimes arranged in a galloping posture, forever charging into the afterlife. The warriors themselves were buried with their weapons, bronze axes, spearheads, and daggers, and the distinctive bone or horn cheek pieces from their horses' bridles, a clear sign of their status as an elite class of charioteers. These Sintashta burials predate the appearance of the light war chariot in the Near East by several centuries. The verdict is clear: the chariot was not a Near Eastern invention that spread north. It was a steppe innovation that was exported south. The Sintashta people and their successors, the wider Andronovo cultural horizon, were the perfect society to create this technology. They were the inheritors of a 1,000-year-old tradition of horse domestication and riding. They were master woodworkers, with access to the birch forests that provided the perfect, strong and flexible wood needed to construct the light, spoked wheels. And they were brilliant metallurgists. The Sintashta sites are characterized by an almost industrial level of bronze production, complete with slag heaps and the remains of sophisticated furnaces. They were innovators in the creation of new and more effective bronze weapons. The chariot was the perfect fusion of all their core competencies, their mastery of the horse, of woodworking, and of metal. But why did they invent it? The chariot, for a steppe society, was not just a weapon. It was a tool that provided a decisive advantage in their own highly mobile world. It could be used for hunting, for protecting their vast herds of livestock from predators, and most critically, for the constant, low-level warfare that characterized steppe life. In a world of vast, open grasslands, speed was everything. The chariot was the ultimate expression of that speed, a technology that allowed a small group of elite warriors to project their power over a huge territory. It was this society of innovators and master horse breeders that became the fountainhead of the great horse trade. The superior breeds of horses they developed and the revolutionary chariot technology they invented were incredibly valuable and desirable commodities. As the Sintashta-Andranovo peoples began to expand and migrate, their influence and their technology spread with them. This expansion was likely not a single, massive wave of conquest, but a complex process of trade, cultural exchange, and small-scale migration. They were the original arms dealers of the Bronze Age. The trail of this technological transfer can be followed southwards. Chariot burials and steppe-style artifacts begin to appear in the Caucasus Mountains, the great land bridge between the steppe and the Near East. From there, the technology and the horses needed to power it would have been introduced to the kingdoms of the south. The great empires of the Near East did not invent the chariot, they imported it. They were the eager customers, the massive market that would create an immense and powerful economic pull for the products of the northern steppes. The horse lords of Sintashta, in creating a weapon to dominate their own world, had inadvertently created the strategic commodity that would define the entire geopolitical landscape of the South and would launch one of the most important and transformative supply chains in the history of ancient trade. The horse lords of the steppe had the supply. The great empires of the South had the demand. But between them lay a vast and formidable landscape of mountains, deserts, and the territories of countless intermediary tribes. The creation of the horse pipeline was not a simple matter of a single straight road. It was a complex, multi-stage, and incredibly challenging logistical enterprise, a network of pathways that had to solve a unique and difficult problem: how to move a large, living, and resource-intensive commodity over thousands of miles. Unlike tin ingots or bolts of silk, horses could not be packed in a crate. They were a self-propelling cargo, but they were also a fragile one, a living asset that required immense skill, organization, and resources to transport. The journey began in the great, open grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, the primary breeding grounds. Here, the first stage of the trade would have taken place. Barbarian chieftains and traders from the south would have journeyed north to the territories of the Andranovo peoples to acquire the horses. This was likely not a simple cash transaction, but a complex exchange of prestige goods. The southern traders would have offered the things the horse lords craved: fine textiles, wine, and above all, the beautifully crafted metalwork of the advanced Near Eastern civilizations. In exchange, the horse lords would have traded their surplus stock of young, strong, but largely untrained horses. From these northern breeding grounds, the Great Horse Pipeline began its journey south. The primary geographical barrier and the main funnel for the entire trade was the Great Caucasus Mountain Range, the massive wall of peaks that separates the steppes from the Near East. The caravans of horses would have had to navigate the few, treacherous, high-altitude passes, like the Dariel Gorge, that cut through this formidable range. This was a slow and dangerous process, requiring an intimate knowledge of the terrain and likely the payment of tolls to the local mountain tribes who controlled these strategic choke points. Once through the mountains, the pipeline entered the sphere of the first great middlemen in the highlands of Armenia and northern Iran. This was a crucial stage. The horses that had arrived from the steppe were hardy and resilient, but they were not yet the finished superweapons that the pharaohs desired. This region became the great finishing school and acclimatization zone for the warhorses. Here, in the cooler highland pastures, the young horses could recover from their long journey and adapt to the different climate and fodder of the south. And it was here that the crucial process of training and harnessing them to the chariot would have taken place. This was a highly specialized skill, a form of advanced military technology in itself, and the kingdoms that controlled this region became the masters of this vital craft. From this great staging area, the now trained and acclimatized horses would begin the final and most profitable leg of their journey. The pipeline branched out, heading west into the Hittite heartland of Anatolia, and south, down the Euphrates River Valley, towards the great consumer markets of Syria and Egypt. This part of the journey was a massive, organized caravan operation. A single shipment of horses for the pharaoh's army could number in the hundreds. Such a large herd would have been a logistical challenge of immense proportions. The caravan would have been a slow-moving, vulnerable, and incredibly resource-intensive entity. A horse, unlike a camel, needs to drink water every single day and consumes a vast quantity of fodder. The route had to be meticulously planned, a chain of oases, riverbanks, and secure pastures, each one no more than a day's march from the next. The caravan would have required a huge support staff, not just drivers and armed guards, but also veterinary specialists to care for the valuable animals. And it would have been a tempting target. A herd of hundreds of high-quality, trained horses was a prize of almost unimaginable value, a far more tempting target for desert raiders than a cargo of pottery or textiles. The security for these caravans would have been a major and expensive undertaking, a cost that was undoubtedly passed on to the final buyer. This entire, complex and multi-stage process, from the initial trade on the steppe, through the dangerous mountain passes, to the training grounds in the highlands, and finally, on the long caravan journey to the south, was the Great Horse Pipeline. It was a masterpiece of ancient trade logistics, a system that required a sophisticated understanding of geography, animal husbandry, military security, and international diplomacy. It was a fragile and incredibly expensive system, but for the great chariot empires of the late Bronze Age, it was the essential artery that fueled their military might and secured their very existence. The immense price they were willing to pay for its precious, living cargo would, in turn, create immense wealth and power for the forgotten kingdoms that controlled the middle of the road. As the horse pipeline descended from the northern steppes and the Caucasus Mountains, it did not flow directly to the great consumer empires of Egypt and the Hittites. It was intercepted. In the fertile lands of northern Mesopotamia and Syria, a new and powerful kingdom had risen, a state that had placed itself in the perfect strategic position to become the master broker of the entire horse trade. This was the kingdom of Mitanni. For nearly 2 centuries, from roughly 1500 to 1300 BC, the Mitanni were a major superpower, an empire whose entire military doctrine, social structure, and economy was built upon a single, revolutionary concept: the absolute mastery of the war chariot, a mastery made possible by their unrivaled access to the northern horse supply. They were the world's first great horse trading empire. The Mitanni are one of the most mysterious of the Great Bronze Age powers. They were a hybrid kingdom, a fusion of a local Hurrian population ruled by an Indo-Aryan elite. This ruling class brought with them 2 things that would define the kingdom's identity: the Indo-Aryan language, with its deep connections to the cultures of the steppe, and a profound, almost religious, obsession with the horse and the chariot. The very name of their elite warrior class, the Maorianu, is an Indo-Aryan term meaning young warriors, and it became synonymous across the Near East with the concept of an aristocratic, hereditary class of charioteers. The Mitanni kingdom was a geographical masterstroke. Their heartland, in the Kaba River Triangle, sat directly astride the great east-west trade routes of Mesopotamia, and most critically, it controlled the northern approaches from the Caucasus. They were the southern gate of the horse pipeline. Any caravan of horses coming from the training grounds of Armenia and northern Iran had to pass through their territory. This gave them a position of immense power. They could control the flow, they could take the best horses for themselves, and they could sell the surplus to the horse-starved kingdoms of the south at an immense profit. This was not just one part of their economy. It was the very foundation of their state. This unrivaled access to a steady supply of high-quality horses allowed the Mitanni to build the most formidable chariot army of their day. They did not just use chariots, they perfected their use. The most remarkable evidence for their expertise comes from a series of clay tablets found in the Hittite archives at Hattusa, the Kikuli text. Kikuli was a master horse trainer from the land of Mitanni who was employed by the Hittite king. His text is a detailed, day-by-day, almost scientific training manual, a 6-month-long program for conditioning and training a warhorse. It is a document of incredible sophistication, detailing specific feeding regimens, exercise routines, including interval training and swimming the horses, and techniques for accustoming the animals to the sights and sounds of battle. This text is a stunning testament to the deep, specialized, and highly advanced horse science that the Mitanni possessed. They were not just traders, they were the world's leading experts in this critical military technology. This military supremacy allowed them to carve out a vast empire. At their height, they controlled a territory that stretched from the Zagros Mountains in the east to the Mediterranean coast in the west. For a time, they were the dominant power in the Near East, a true superpower that could challenge both the Hittites and the Egyptians. Their power was so great that the pharaohs of Egypt, who had once conquered the region, were now forced to deal with them as equals. The diplomatic correspondence of the age, the Amarna letters, is filled with messages between the pharaoh and the Mitanni king, in which the pharaoh begs for the hand of a Mitanni princess in marriage, a clear sign of the Mitanni's high international standing. And what did the pharaoh offer in exchange for these alliances and, implicitly, for access to the Mitanni's network of horses and expertise. Gold. Egypt, with its vast Nubian gold mines, was the richest nation on earth. The letters show the Mitanni king constantly demanding shipments of gold. "In your country, my brother, gold is as plentiful as dust," one Mitanni king famously wrote to the pharaoh. This was the great transaction at the heart of the late Bronze Age economy. The Mitanni controlled the supply of the ultimate military technology, the horse. The Egyptians controlled the supply of the ultimate currency, gold. The ancient trade between the two was a direct exchange of military power for financial wealth. The Mitanni Empire was, in the end, a middleman state par excellence. Their power was not derived from a vast population or a unique agricultural surplus. It was derived entirely from their control of a single, strategic node in a long-distance supply chain. They were the tin barons, the garum kings, the masters of the pipeline. Their story is a perfect example of how a well-positioned intermediary can rise to become a world power. But it is also a cautionary tale. Their power was entirely dependent on maintaining their unique position in that chain. When the rising Hittite Empire to their north eventually grew powerful enough to challenge and break their control over the northern routes, the Mitanni kingdom, its single pillar of power knocked away, collapsed with surprising speed. The horse pipeline, originating on the distant steppes and controlled by the powerful Mitanni middlemen, ultimately flowed towards two of the greatest and most voracious consumer markets the world had ever seen: the New Kingdom of Egypt and the Hittite Empire of Anatolia. These were the two superpowers of the late Bronze Age, locked in a decades-long struggle for control of the Near East. For them, the war chariot was not just another weapon. It was the decisive instrument of state power, the very symbol of their imperial might. This created an insatiable, unending, and desperate demand for the components of this technology, particularly the horses. The story of this demand is a story of a high-stakes, international arms trade, a world of intense diplomatic negotiation, royal marriages, and the constant, anxious quest for a military edge, all of which is miraculously preserved for us in the words of the kings themselves. Our window into this world is a collection of several hundred clay tablets, discovered in the late 19th century in the ruins of the Egyptian city of Amarna. Written in Akkadian, the international diplomatic language of the day, these Amarna letters are the preserved state correspondence of the pharaohs Amenhotep III and Akhenaten from the 14th century BC. They are letters from the great kings of Babylonia, Assyria, the Hittites, and most importantly for our story, the Mitanni. These are not grand historical chronicles. They are the raw, unfiltered, and often petty and desperate messages between the most powerful men on earth. And they are utterly obsessed with the exchange of goods. The letters reveal a world that functions like a vast, exclusive, and highly competitive gift exchange between royal brothers. But these are not gifts in the modern sense. They are the very substance of international diplomacy and trade. The system was clear. A king would send a greeting gift to his royal brother and would then expect a countergift of at least equal and preferably greater value. The entire system was a complex and often contentious negotiation, a constant jockeying for position and advantage, all lubricated by the flow of luxury goods. And what did the kings want from each other? Above all else, they wanted the unique products of each other's realms. The king of Babylonia would send beautifully crafted lapis lazuli from the eastern trade routes. The king of Assyria would send fine chariots. And the pharaoh of Egypt, the master of the Nubian mines, was the great supplier of the most desired commodity of all, gold. "Let my brother send me much gold" is a constant, almost monotonous refrain in the letters from the Asiatic kings. But the pharaoh did not give his gold away for free. In return, he demanded the one thing he could not produce himself: the high technology of the chariot, and most especially the horses and the expertise that came with them. The great masters of this technology, the Mitanni, were the pharaoh's most important and frustrating partners in this trade. The letters between the two courts are a masterclass in high-stakes negotiation. The Mitanni king, Tushratta, is a constant and demanding correspondent. He sends his daughter, Tadakippa, to be a bride for the pharaoh, a classic diplomatic alliance. But this is also a business deal. In return for his daughter, and for the continued good relations that ensure access to the horse trade, he demands a staggering price. He asks for statues of solid gold, for immense quantities of the precious metal, complaining bitterly when the shipments are delayed or when he suspects the gold is not of the highest purity. This correspondence is the undeniable proof of the horse economy in action. Horses were a key part of these diplomatic packages. A king would send a greeting gift that included not just jewels and precious metals, but 10 teams of horses, a chariot inlaid with gold, and just as importantly, the expert charioteers and trainers who were a vital part of the technological package. This was an arms trade. The great kings were exchanging their local luxury goods for the most advanced military hardware of their day. The Hittite Empire, Egypt's great rival in the north, was also a major player in this same game. As a land-based power, closer to the horse lands of the steppe and the training grounds of Mitanni, the Hittites built a formidable chariot corps that was the terror of the Near East. Their access to this technology was a key part of their military advantage. The greatest and most famous battle of the age, the Battle of Kadesh, fought between the pharaoh Ramesses II and the Hittite king Muwatalli II around 1274 BC, was a monumental clash of these two chariot-based superpowers. It was the largest chariot battle in human history, involving an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 of these war machines. The relief carvings of the battle on the walls of Ramesses's temples at Abu Simbel are a magnificent piece of imperial propaganda, but they are also a testament to the centrality of the horse. The scenes are a chaotic, swirling mass of chariots, horses, and archers. The inscriptions tell of the immense logistical effort of the campaign and the immense value placed on the chariot corps. This was a battle between two giants, and the outcome depended entirely on the skill of their charioteers and the quality and quantity of the thousands of horses they had managed to procure through the great, continent-spanning ancient trade network. The Amarna letters and the reliefs of Kadesh are the ultimate proof of our thesis. The entire geopolitical world of the Late Bronze Age, its wars, its diplomacy, and its very survival, was dependent on the steady, reliable flow of its most strategic and most precious commodity, the horse. The horse was the strategic superweapon of the late Bronze Age, the ultimate instrument of imperial power. But what was its price? The economy of the horse trade was not a simple, open market. It was a complex and often opaque system of diplomatic gift, exchange, tribute, and high-stakes bartering, all governed by the fundamental realities of supply and demand. By examining the goods that flowed northwards in exchange for the horses that flowed south, we can reconstruct the incredible value proposition of this ancient trade. It was a classic exchange of a raw but vital technology, the living horse, for the most valuable, high-status, finished luxury goods of the great southern civilizations. This exchange was fantastically profitable for every middleman in the chain and fundamentally shaped the economies of both the producers and the consumers. At the top of the supply chain, on the vast steppes of Eurasia, the horse lords who bred the animals were the primary producers. Their price for a young, untrained horse would have been the lowest in the entire chain, but the goods they received in return would have been transformative for their society. They were trading a locally abundant resource, horses, for objects of immense rarity and prestige in their world. Archaeological finds from the Andronovo culture show the appearance of sophisticated bronze objects, jewelry, and textiles, whose styles and origins are clearly from the south. The southern traders were offering high-tech, manufactured goods that the steppe peoples could not produce themselves. This influx of prestige goods would have dramatically enhanced the power of the chieftains who controlled the trade, allowing them to arm their followers and adorn themselves with the symbols of a distant, more sophisticated world. The next and arguably most profitable stage was that of the great middlemen, the kingdom of Mitanni. As the master brokers and trainers, they added immense value to the raw product. They took the wild, untrained horses from the north and through the sophisticated techniques described in the Kikuli text, transformed them into disciplined, battle-ready warhorses. This value add was their primary source of wealth. The price they could command for a fully trained team of chariot horses was astronomically higher than the price of the untrained animals they had acquired. The Amarna letters give us a clear and stunning picture of what this price was. The primary commodity that the Mitanni kings demanded in exchange for their horses and their diplomatic cooperation was gold, and not just small amounts. They demanded it by the ton. The letters are filled with the Mitanni king Tushratta's constant, almost obsessive, requests for massive shipments of Egyptian gold. He asks for gold to decorate his palaces, for gold for his daughter's dowry, for gold simply to be sent in very great quantity. For the Mitanni, the horse-for-gold trade was a direct and incredibly lucrative exchange. They were converting their unique military technological asset, the trained horse, into the ultimate, universally recognized currency of wealth and power. But the price was not just paid in gold. The consumer empires also had to export their own unique, high-value goods. Egypt would send magnificent, intricately carved ivory boxes, exquisite linen textiles, and beautiful high-status furniture made from rare woods. Babylonia would send horses and chariots of its own, alongside lapis lazuli. The Mycenaean Greeks, as we see from the cargo of the Uluburun shipwreck, would have been trading their own fine pottery, their wine and olive oil, and their services as expert sailors and merchants. This was a complex, multipolar economy where each great power traded from its own unique strengths. We can even attempt to quantify the value of a horse in the great consumer economies. Hittite legal texts from the period provide a fascinating price list. A fully trained, prime warhorse was valued at 20 shekels of silver. By comparison, a prized bull for plowing was worth only 10 shekels, a cow was worth 7, and a sheep was worth just 1. A single warhorse was worth 20 sheep, but even this pales in comparison to the value of a complete weapons system. A fully equipped chariot, complete with its team of 2 trained horses, could be valued at many times that amount. This was a commodity exclusively for the state and the highest echelons of the aristocracy. The immense cost of creating and maintaining a large chariot corps was a constant and heavy drain on the state treasury, a military expenditure that was every bit as significant as a modern nation's spending on fighter jets and aircraft carriers. This entire economic system was a classic example of a seller's market. The demand for high-quality warhorses was absolute and desperate. The supply was limited and controlled by a long and difficult chain of middlemen. This gave immense leverage to the suppliers. The kings of Mitanni could make outrageous demands of the mighty pharaoh because they knew the pharaoh had no other choice. He could not breed the horses himself in the quantities he needed, and he could not afford to be without them. The entire geopolitical balance of power was dictated by this simple economic reality. The humble, semi-nomadic horse breeders of the northern steppes and the shrewd middlemen who controlled the pipeline held the great, glittering empires of the south in a state of permanent and very expensive strategic dependency. For 3 centuries, the great chariot empires of the Near East had existed in a state of dynamic, if often violent, equilibrium. Their power, their prestige, and their entire military doctrine were built upon the steady, reliable flow of horses from the northern steppes. The horse pipeline was the great, invisible artery that sustained the entire system. But this artery was long, fragile, and deeply vulnerable to shock. Around the year 1200 BC, the stable, interconnected world of the Late Bronze Age was consumed by a perfect storm of climate change, famine, and invasion. In this new, chaotic environment, the horse pipeline broke. The catastrophic failure of this single, strategic supply chain was a critical, and often overlooked, factor in the rapid and spectacular collapse of the very empires that depended on it. The age of the superweapon was about to be brought to its knees by a crisis of logistics. The Late Bronze Age collapse, as we have seen in the context of the tin trade, was a systemic failure. The invasions of the mysterious sea peoples are the most famous part of this story, a wave of maritime raiding and migration that crashed against the shores of the eastern Mediterranean, burning the great coastal cities and shattering the old trade routes. But this was also a time of immense upheaval on land. The great Hittite Empire, which had dominated Anatolia for centuries, collapsed with a stunning and almost total finality. Its great capital at Hattusa was burned and abandoned. The entire complex state apparatus vanished from history. In the Levant, great trading hubs like Ugarit were destroyed. And mighty Egypt, though it survived the onslaught, was left permanently weakened, its imperial reach shattered. This widespread political and military chaos had a devastating and immediate impact on the horse pipeline. The long, complex chain of exchange and transport was broken at multiple points simultaneously. The stable kingdoms of the Near East, which had once policed the caravan routes, were now fighting for their very survival. The Mediterranean ports, which had facilitated the high-value trade that paid for the horses, were now smoldering ruins, and the great middlemen, like the Mitanni, had already been swept away by the rising power of the Hittites and Assyrians. The entire, intricate human infrastructure of the horse trade disintegrated. The consequences for the great chariot armies would have been immediate and catastrophic. A chariot corps was a high-maintenance, technologically demanding military arm. Chariots were lightweight, composite structures that broke easily in the heat of battle and required constant repair by skilled craftsmen. Horses were even more fragile. They were wounded in battle, they succumbed to disease, and they aged. The effectiveness of a chariot army depended on a constant and massive influx of replacement vehicles, and above all, replacement horses. A kingdom might have 1,000 chariots in its arsenals, but without a steady supply of thousands of trained horses, those chariots were little more than useless pieces of wood and bronze. The collapse of the horse pipeline created a horse famine. The great empires, now cut off from their primary northern source, would have found it almost impossible to replenish their chariot corps. A pharaoh or a Hittite king could no longer send an envoy with a shipment of gold to a neighboring kingdom to procure a few hundred new horses. The neighboring kingdoms were also in a state of collapse, and the routes to the north were now a lawless chaos. They were forced to rely on their own, inferior, local breeding programs, which could never produce the quantity or the quality of horses needed to sustain their massive armies. Their greatest military asset, the very symbol of their power, had become a wasting asset, a magnificent but irreplaceable machine that was slowly grinding to a halt. This military crisis was compounded by the arrival of a new way of war. The chaos of the collapse seems to have spurred a tactical revolution. The raiders of the Sea Peoples and other groups on the move did not fight in the old, formal style of the great empires. They practiced a more fluid, asymmetric, and infantry-focused form of warfare, and these new warriors were armed with a new generation of weapons, long, slashing swords and javelins. Against the old, static lines of spearmen, the chariot had been a queen on the chessboard. But against a swarming, chaotic mass of mobile, javelin-throwing infantry, the chariot's weaknesses were brutally exposed. The horses, the most valuable and fragile part of the system, were a large and vulnerable target. The empires were caught in a strategic death spiral. Their signature weapon, the chariot, was proving less effective against the new tactics of their enemies. And at the very same time, the catastrophic failure of the horse pipeline meant they could not even replace the losses they were suffering. They were trying to fight a new kind of war with an aging, irreplaceable, and increasingly obsolete weapon system. The collapse of the horse trade, therefore, was not a peripheral economic event. It was a central military catastrophe. It disarmed the great superpowers, robbing them of their decisive technological edge at the very moment they needed it most. The thundering chariot armies that had dominated the world for 500 years were in the end brought to a standstill not by a greater army, but by the simple, brutal fact that the long road from the steppes had finally been cut. Our investigation began with the thundering image of a pharaoh's war chariot, the undisputed superweapon of the late Bronze Age. We sought to understand the hidden engine that powered this magnificent war machine. Having traced the journey of its most vital component, the horse, from the vast, open steppes of Eurasia, through the hands of powerful middlemen empires, and into the royal stables of the great superpowers, the evidence is now clear. The verdict is that the entire complex geopolitical world of the late Bronze Age, its balance of power, its diplomacy, and its very military identity, was built upon a fragile, long-distance, and incredibly expensive supply chain for a single, strategic biological technology. The warhorse. We have established that the light, spoked-wheel chariot was a revolutionary weapons system that conferred a decisive military advantage. But it was a system that was utterly dependent on its living engine. We have shown that the great, urbanized empires of the Near East, Egypt, and the Hittites lacked the unique geographical conditions to breed these high-performance horses on an industrial scale. This created a profound and permanent state of strategic dependency on the barbarian peoples of the northern steppes, the original innovators and master breeders. Our investigation has charted the horse pipeline, the perilous, 1,000-mile-long network of ancient trade that bridged this geographical divide. We have identified the crucial role of the middlemen, particularly the powerful Mitanni kingdom, who transformed their control over this pipeline into a formidable empire of their own. They were the great brokers of the age, the horse traders who held the great powers in a state of economic and military dependency, famously trading their military expertise for Egyptian gold. We have seen, through the stunning first-hand evidence of the Amarna letters, that this was not a simple, peripheral trade. It was the central, defining subject of high-level international diplomacy. Kings and pharaohs operated within a high-stakes, international arms market, constantly negotiating, begging, and bartering for the horses and chariots that were the ultimate currency of power. The Battle of Kadesh was the spectacular culmination of this system, a monumental clash between two superpowers, both armed to the teeth by this same global supply chain. Finally, we have concluded that the very fragility of this horse pipeline was a critical factor in the catastrophic collapse of the late Bronze Age. When the chaos of the sea peoples and other crises severed the trade routes, the supply of horses stopped. The great chariot armies, unable to replace their losses, were rendered a wasting asset. The military superstructure of the great empires, built on this single, imported technology, proved fatally brittle. The loss of the horse was a logistical knockout blow from which they could not recover. Therefore, the entire story of the Chariot Age is a story of a single, critical vulnerability. The balance of power was determined not by who had the most gold or the grandest temples, but by who had the most reliable access to horses. The horse trade was the world's first great strategic arms trade, and it created a deeply interconnected but dangerously fragile world. The great glittering empires of the late Bronze Age were, in the final analysis, giants with feet of clay, their immense power utterly dependent on the steady, thundering hoofbeats from a distant, barbarian land. The thundering sound of the great chariot armies has faded into history. The proud Mitanni are a forgotten name, and the great empires they supplied have long since crumbled into dust. The rise of new military technologies, first massed infantry and later true cavalry, rendered the war chariot obsolete, and with it, the specific, strategic importance of its unique supply chain. But the story of the Great Bronze Age horse trade is far more than a simple chapter in the history of warfare. It is a foundational and timeless lesson in the nature of power, technology, and the profound, often perilous, state of interdependence that has shaped human civilization from its earliest days. The story of the horse pipeline is the ultimate case study in military technological dependency. It reveals a stark and enduring truth. A nation's military might is often only as strong as its most vulnerable supply line. The great pharaohs and Hittite kings commanded immense resources, but their power was perpetually held hostage by their inability to produce the very engine their superweapon required. This pattern of dependency on a foreign, barbarian, or rival power for a critical military resource repeats itself endlessly throughout history. It is the story of Rome's reliance on foreign auxiliaries, of Britain's reliance on colonial manpower, and of the modern world's complex and often dangerous dependency on global supply chains for everything from strategic minerals to advanced microchips. The anxieties that kept the pharaoh awake at night, the fear that the horse supply might be cut off, are the same anxieties that occupy the minds of generals and presidents today. This story also fundamentally reframes our understanding of the relationship between civilized and barbarian worlds. The narrative is often one of a sophisticated core exploiting a primitive periphery. But the horse trade reveals a far more complex and nuanced reality. The barbarian peoples of the steppe were not passive victims. They were the masters of a revolutionary technology and the proprietors of a priceless biological resource. They were the innovators, the breeders, and the indispensable partners in a global economy. The great, urbanized empires of the South were not their masters, but their customers. This relationship, a complex mixture of fear, respect, and mutual need, is a powerful reminder that power in the ancient world was not a one-way street, and that the technological contributions of non-urban peoples have been a constant and vital engine of history. Finally, the story of the horse trade is a testament to the power of a single idea, a single technology, to reshape the world. The harnessing of the horse and its combination with the light, spoke-wheel chariot was a revolution that redefined the very concepts of speed, of distance, and of power. It created a new kind of warrior, a new kind of king, and a new kind of empire. And the desperate, continent-spanning quest to acquire this technology was a force so powerful that it forged new connections, created new wealth, and bound the fates of disparate civilizations together in a shared, fragile destiny. The hoofbeats of the first domesticated horses on the Eurasian steppe were the starting gun for a new kind of race, an arms race that would dominate the world for 500 years. The echoes of those hoofbeats can still be heard in every story of technological competition and strategic dependency that has followed. They are a timeless reminder that the engine of history is often not what we build, but what we are forced to seek from a world beyond our own.